I walked into the office thinking I'd shake a few hands, maybe get a signed card from the crew. Nothing big. My last day was supposed to be tomorrow. I'd even picked up donuts for the tech guys downstairs. Maple bars, jelly, the usual stuff they liked. Thought I'd say a quiet goodbye, take one last look at the server logs, and slide out the back without much fuss. After 31 years, it felt right. No party, no balloons, just peace. But the second I stepped off the elevator, I knew something was off. HR wasn't there. No farewell banner, no smell of burnt coffee from the break room. Just Damon Kessler standing in front of my office like he owned the damn floor. His stupid quarter-zip sweater, navy with that tiny stitched logo. Like he was still trying to impress Silicon Valley. He didn't even wait for me to speak. "This is effective immediately," he said, handing me a single sheet of paper like it was a parking ticket. "Your role has been dissolved due to strategic realignment." That was it. No handshake, no nod of thanks. Just my name, my title, and the termination date. Today. Not tomorrow, not even end of day. Just now. I looked at him. The way he avoided eye contact, kept his body turned slightly away, like I was contagious. That paper was cold in my hand. I felt it press against the inside of my folder as I tucked it away without a word. Behind him, the lights flickered in my office. My chair was still turned the way I'd left it. A photo of my wife and son sat on the corner of my desk. I didn't even get to grab it. I nodded once. Didn't throw the paper. Didn't raise my voice. I just walked past him, slow and steady, my footsteps loud in the quiet hallway. Elevator down to the first floor. Nodded at Marcus in security. He gave me a confused half wave. I pulled my badge off my belt, scanned it one last time at the exit. Beep. Green light. Door clicked open, and I was gone. Quick note: before listening, share which city or country you're watching from. The wind outside hit harder than I expected. Not cold, just sharp. Like it knew I just lost something that took decades to build. I stood there for a second, donuts still in hand, then turned toward the parking lot and kept walking. Didn't look back. I set the donuts on the counter and never opened the box. The next morning, I sat at the kitchen table with black coffee, cold and untouched. My wife had already left for work, part-time shift at the clinic, and the house was dead quiet. No phone calls, no emails, just me and a stack of spiral notebooks spread open like a crime scene, handwritten diagrams, backup protocols, login chains, and dependency maps. Every page was mine, the bones of a system I'd built from nothing, not just lines of code, the whole damn infrastructure. Endpoints, redundancies, modular layers. I knew every patch and every flaw because I'd shaped the thing one brick at a time over 31 years. They didn't just fire a guy, they amputated the architect. And now I was sitting there, watching the sun crawl across my floor, knowing exactly what they'd forgotten. Years ago, I spotted something buried in the transaction logs. Tiny offsets, fractional transfers embedded inside low-priority cross-routing batches. Looked like routing dust, leftover data, but it wasn't. Someone was laundering money inside the machine. Slow, careful, but consistent. I reported it to the board, showed the logs, walked them through the script line by line. They nodded like it was a big deal. Then they buried it like I'd sneezed. A week later, my calendar went blank. Meetings I'd led for over a decade suddenly didn't include me. I wasn't asked. I wasn't told. Just quietly iced out. They didn't want a watchdog. They wanted a tool that shut up and signed what it was handed. Later that year, they came to me with a report, said it needed approval before end of quarter. Looked good on the surface. But I knew the system. The performance metrics were padded, fluffed up with future forecasts disguised as actuals. They handed me a pen, said my name would give it credibility, said it'd go a long way toward my son's Columbia package. I refused. He took out loans. Finished in 4 years anyway. But I never forgot the way they smiled when I said no, tight-lipped, like I'd failed some kind of unspoken loyalty test. That's when I started sketching something else. Not a trap, not revenge, a safeguard, a layer of logic, deep buried beneath the control access systems, where no auditor would think to look. It wasn't destructive. It didn't disable anything. But it evaluated context. If I walked out clean, the system would hand off smooth as butter. But if I got pushed out dirty, the core would recognize hostile removal, and it wouldn't respond to them anymore. It would wait, Not for vengeance, for trust. I built it myself. No junior engineers, no contractors, just hours at night, slow and careful, like carving a key that only fit one lock. I didn't name it anything obvious, just called it H-Logic, and I never told a soul. Not because I wanted to drop a bomb, I didn't. I still believed that. Maybe deep down, people like Damon would do the right thing when it counted. But Damon Kessler didn't read the documentation, didn't know what he was unplugging when he cut me loose. And now the system was reacting, quietly, instinctively, not to them, to me, just as I designed it. At 9:06 a.m., the first alert hit Cincinnati. Transaction declined, node mismatch. No big panic. The ops team flagged it as a regional hiccup, network drift, or a sync delay. Stuff like that happens sometimes. A couple rerouted packets, a stale session token, nothing serious. But then Chicago lit up. Same alert, same error, then Minneapolis. And then the flood started. By 9:18, 6 branches were fully locked out. Teller terminals froze. Auth servers timed out. Customers stood in line while screen prompts spun like slot machines. Backup keys failed. Internal bypasses triggered rejection codes. Even the exec override out of Damon's office flagged invalid. That's when their lead engineer, Raj, sharp guy but green in all the wrong places, started sweating through his collar. He thought the system was crashing, but it wasn't crashing. It was refusing. By 9:22, the internal logs began throwing a new message, something they hadn't seen before. Root override request denied. Verification required. H-Logic. That hit like a brick. No one in the room knew what it meant. H-Logic wasn't in the documentation, not in the training manuals, not even buried in legacy code notes. But it was in my notebooks, hidden deep underneath fallback access layers, behind dependencies they hadn't touched in years. It wasn't a virus, wasn't an exploit. It was a gate, one that only opened under clean transition conditions. They wanted to erase me, scrap my ID, flip a switch and install someone younger, cheaper, dumber. But the system didn't accept that. It logged my removal as hostile and locked down. By 9:30, Damon was already pacing, face red, voice louder than usual. "Why is this happening?" he barked. Raj threw his hands up. "It's not a system crash, sir. It's a denial protocol. Something is evaluating root credentials and rejecting them. Then override it. We tried. Keys don't work. Legacy accounts don't work. Nothing's working." Another engineer spoke up from the back. "It's not a standard denial. The system's asking for verification under something called H-Logic. It's treating the transition as invalid." Damon froze. "Then get me the guy who built it." They all looked at each other. No one said it, but they were thinking the same thing. They already fired me. That's when he snapped. "Call him. Offer whatever it takes. I don't care. Just get him back." But I wasn't answering. I sat on my porch, sipping fresh coffee this time, watching the morning traffic crawl by like it had nothing to do with me. I'd silenced my phone. I could feel it vibrating in my pocket, again and again, like a desperate kid pounding on a locked door. They didn't get it. The customer app crashed shortly after. Login failures, transfer errors, scheduled payments bouncing off dead nodes like rubber balls. Inside HQ, Damon was spinning, his voice now lower, clipped, but shaking at the edges. "Why is it doing this? We pay for reliability. This isn't supposed to happen." Raj leaned over the console. "It's not a reliability issue. It's a clearance issue. The system doesn't trust us." "Then make it trust you," another dev called out. "We don't have the logic key. Without it, the architecture's treating us like a security threat." They tried injecting scripts, legacy recovery codes, emergency vault keys. Nothing worked. Every time, the same line: override denied, verification required, H-Logic. By 10 o'clock, they had 3 full floors in crisis mode. Damon still paced like it was a temporary glitch, but his voice was quieter now, desperate, not angry. I pictured him standing in that glass office, blinds half drawn, collar loose, hair falling out of place, watching the lights blink across a frozen dashboard, and for the first time, maybe, realizing what they'd really fired. Not a man. The only one who ever knew where the foundation began. At 11:20 a.m., I heard the knock, fast, impatient. I opened the door and saw the courier standing there, sweaty. shifting from foot to foot, like he didn't want to be the one delivering what he was holding. Thick leather-bound folder, Gentry Bank seal stamped into the corner. I signed, closed the door, and sat down at the kitchen table where my coffee had already gone cold again. Inside, full reinstatement, same title, same seniority, plus, bonus, pension doubled, start date, retroactive to 8:31 a.m. that same morning, 2 minutes before they fired me. Everything signed, everything official. I read it once, then I read it again, slower. Took me maybe a minute to understand just how desperate they were. At the bottom was a phone number, direct line. I picked up the receiver, not my cell, the old landline in the hallway I hadn't used in years, and dialed. 3 rings. Damon answered himself. "Tom," he said, his voice dipped in syrup, way too sweet for the panic I knew he was sitting in. "Let's just get this fixed. You're reinstated, all set. Just hit the override and we'll get back to normal." I didn't raise my voice, didn't laugh, just said, "It doesn't work that way." He didn't say anything at first, but I heard it. The pause. That tiny hollow breath people take when they realize they're already too late. "The system," I said, "only accepts the override from an active employee at the moment of trigger." I waited, gave him a second to process it. "You fired me at 8:33 a.m. The logic doesn't care about backtracking. That moment's gone." He finally spoke. "But this is official. It's backdated. You're back on payroll. We're covered." "No," I said. "You're covered on paper. The logic doesn't care about paperwork. It cares about behavior, sequence." Intense silence again. I could picture him in that office. Tie pulled, jaw tight, blinking fast like he always did when something didn't compute. "It's not sabotage, Damon," I said. "It's architecture." He opened his mouth, then stopped. Maybe to argue, maybe to beg. Doesn't matter. I hung up, walked back to the kitchen, sat down, folder still open. The reinstatement form looked sharp. Clean signatures, fresh ink, all the right buzzwords. I didn't touch it, didn't even close it. Just slid it across the table and pushed it under the old placemat my wife kept forgetting to throw away. Then I poured myself a fresh cup of coffee, stood by the window, and watched the breeze roll through the neighbor's hedge. That was the moment they finally realized. I hadn't shut them out. They had. By noon, it wasn't a glitch anymore. It was a collapse. 83% of Gentry's front-end systems were dead. Teller screens at every branch stuck in login loops. Internal dashboards throwing timeout errors. Loan officers couldn't pull up customer profiles. Staff had to dig out paper forms. Some didn't even know where the file drawers were. The manual backup processes were a joke, obsolete. Half the younger staff had never been trained on them. Phones rang nonstop while customers waited outside in lines that snaked into parking lots. Inside the headquarters, the panic had gone quiet. No more yelling, no more pacing, just silence. That eerie kind. The kind you hear in an ER waiting room when nobody wants to ask the one question hanging in the air. At 12:20 p.m., Gentry's stock slipped below $100. 15 minutes later, it had dropped 19%. By then, the CFO had locked herself in her office and was whispering with lawyers. Word was, over $3 billion in market cap had evaporated in less than 2 hours. Damon sat in the war room, still in his stupid quarter zip, hair sticking to his forehead, just staring at the main screen. One line kept blinking. Override denied. Architect clearance required. He didn't move, didn't blink. Just watched it flash like it was spelling out his own death sentence. Rage and the dev team threw everything they had at it. Injected scripts, rolled old images, dug through every repo they could find. They even tried booting up a ghost instance of the 2017 framework. Still nothing. The system wasn't hacked. It wasn't broken. It was locked. And the key didn't exist anymore. Somewhere around 12:50, one of the junior engineers, couldn't have been older than 23, stood up from his desk, pale as a sheet. He said, "Even if we rebuild from scratch, we're talking $500 million. Maybe more. And that's assuming full rebuild capacity. 6 months minimum." No one argued, no one even looked surprised, because by then, they all knew. This wasn't something you patched. This was the foundation itself, refusing to hold them up. Damon finally stood. He didn't yell, didn't throw a chair, just walked out of the war room with his phone already in his hand, straight to his corner office. Ann called the board. He was done pretending he could fix it. I didn't see it happen, but I could picture the scene perfectly. Those dark glass walls, the panoramic skyline behind him, the faint buzz of a city still running while his empire fell apart from the inside out. I imagined his voice, quiet now, defeated, explaining to the board how they lost their systems, not because of sabotage, but because they cut out the one person who ever understood what trust meant to a machine. At 1:10 p.m., one of the last internal reports from their diagnostic team landed in the Slack archive. Core logic layer unreachable. Reauthentication failed. No fallback route found. They were spinning in circles with no brakes and no driver, and they still didn't fully understand the part that mattered most. I hadn't taken anything from them. I'd simply stopped giving. At 2 p.m. on the dot, I hit publish. No drama, no emotion. Just a public statement posted to my professional page and sent to every news outlet I could think of. I said I hadn't sabotaged anything, that no malicious code had ever been introduced, that the system wasn't failing. It was behaving exactly as designed to protect itself from the unethical removal of its architect. Attached to the statement was a PDF, a single email, dated June 18th, 2015. Subject line, Transition Ethics, Long-Term Infrastructure Trust. Addressed to Gentry Board Distribution. List, the body was short, no more than 4 paragraphs. I warned them then. Told them that speed without ethics was a liability, that if leadership treated the system as disposable, it would return the favor, that without mutual trust, denial of access wasn't just possible, it was inevitable. They never replied to that message, but now everyone else did. By 2:18, tech forums lit up. Twitter reposts, LinkedIn shares, industry bloggers breaking it down line by line. Engineers from rival banks started quoting it, calling it a quiet revolution in defensive architecture. One line stuck. I only withdrew the one thing I truly owned, my trust. By 3 o'clock, customer service lines at Gentry were jammed. Branches were flooded. People weren't just angry. They were scared. They didn't care about systems or logic trees or ethics clauses. They cared about not getting paid, about mortgages auto-drafting into thin air. By 4 o'clock, accounts were being closed in droves. Another bank, Apex Federal, rolled out emergency ads across local news and radio. Simple line, stable, trusted, transparent. They didn't have to say who they were talking about. Everyone knew. Inside Gentry, it wasn't chaos anymore. It was surrender. People stopped barking orders. They just sat at their desks, trying not to get caught in the fallout. At 4:30, Damon was suspended. No press release, no all-hands call. Just a quiet order from the board and an escort to the elevator. He didn't argue, didn't fight. He walked out the front doors without a word. No jacket, no box of belongings. Just his phone in his hand and a look on his face like maybe, just maybe, he'd finally understood the cost of cutting corners when the blueprint warned you not to. At 5:14 p.m., legal discovered the system wasn't theirs at all. It was licensed under my name and company. The entire digital infrastructure Gentry had bragged about for a decade, the one they told investors was proprietary, internally built, uniquely secured, none of it was theirs. I'd offered them a license back in 2014 when I rebuilt the system from the ground up. It was cleaner that way. A separate legal entity. Easier to manage innovation without getting buried in the company politics. They agreed, signed off, never read the fine print. And buried deep inside that contract, right there in black and white, was a simple clause. Termination of the named architect without completion of the scheduled knowledge transfer voids all operational rights to the system. Which meant that the second Damon handed me that paper, their access wasn't just revoked. It was illegal. I didn't have to sue, didn't have to threaten. The system locked them out because it was designed to honor that clause, not out of spite, out of structure. A single piece of logic tied directly to a legal truth. The machine obeyed what the company ignored. No one ever checked. No one ever asked. They treated my work like furniture, built it, used it, then figured they could toss the guy who made it and keep the pieces. But the code didn't care who was in the big chair. It cared who signed the blueprint. And that name wasn't Damon's. It was mine. By Sunday morning, the headlines had already made their rounds. Architect brings down a giant without touching a line of code. When quiet men design, loud consequences. The lockout heard around Wall Street. But I didn't watch, didn't read the articles. I was in the backyard, coffee in one hand, pulling weeds with the other. The lemon tree needed trimming. The hose had a crack near the nozzle. Life kept moving. I hadn't broken anything. I hadn't lashed out or set traps. All I'd done was let the machine follow the rules I gave it, rules they chose to ignore. My son called that morning, asked if I'd seen the coverage. I said no. He laughed, said he wasn't surprised, said he was proud. I hadn't heard that tone from him in years. A few former coworkers reached out too. One from accounting, one from InfoSec. Said they'd never realized how deep the system went. One apologized, but I wasn't looking for apologies. What mattered was that the structure held. The thing I built didn't buckle under pressure. It didn't burn bridges or seek revenge. It simply refused to serve people who didn't respect it. At 9:12 a.m., a black envelope landed on my porch, hand-delivered, no label, just weight. Inside was a solid brass plaque. Thomas Harlan, Chief Architect Systems that protect their makers. No job offer, no check. Just a message engraved on the back. We don't need you to save us. We just want to build what you believed was possible. It was from Apex Federal, no surprise. They saw the writing on the wall before anyone else. I stood there holding it for a long time, not smiling, not angry, just calm. I mounted the plaque beside the old shed, right next to the workbench where I used to sketch out architecture drafts with a pencil and a thermos. Then I stepped back and whispered, I didn't design it to punish them. I designed it to protect the system from people like them. And with that, I went back inside, not to fix anything, just to quietly design whatever came next.